Mm. That's really, really interesting, actually. Well, thank you so much for that. If anybody's got anything else, you can still type into chat. But we are just a tiny bit behind the agenda. So I'm going to pass across to Mike now. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, three of you, for doing your input. That was brilliant. Hi, Mike. Thanks for coming along. So, Mike, do you want to introduce yourself, Mike? I'll leave it to you.
Thanks very much. So I'm Mike Nicholson. I'm Director of Undergraduate Admissions and Outreach at the University of Bath. But I'm also, for my sins, a trustee of the AQA Exam Board. And Susie asked me to come along today to talk both about how the admission cycle's going, but also how the things are likely to fall out with the exams, both GCSE and post-16 this year. So I'm going to just do a whistle-stop tour, but leave time for questions. Firstly, I think it is fair to say that the impact of putting the UCAS deadline for equal consideration back to the 29th of January has had an impact on candidate behaviour. Initially, there was a kind of belief, I think, that because the 15th of January was lodged in everybody's mind, it would mean that students would still complete by the 15th of January. Well, unsurprisingly, lo and behold, you give people 2 extra weeks and they take 2 extra weeks. And certainly at Bath, we ended up with about 29,000 applications this year, so up roughly 1,500, 2,000 applications on the previous year, and about 8,000 of those applications, so almost 1 in 4, or just over 1 in 4, came in the last 48 hours before the 29th of January deadline. So it effectively means that the team who work on admissions, and at Bath we've got a very centralised admissions team, are probably at least a couple of weeks behind on processing, and that is compounded this year by the continued lockdown, so that if we look back to 2020, by the point we entered lockdown, the first lockdown in around about this time in March, most admissions teams were aiming for the 30th of March deadline and had a fairly normal working year up until that point. So most offers were out by about this point in March. This year, the entire team has been working at a distance to the university campus. Many of my team are staff who have children, so certainly during the most recent periods they've also been trying to fit homeschooling somewhere into the mix, and it's only really been in the last week or so that most of the team have been able to move back to fully focus on their admissions work during normal working hours, and therefore I think we're probably at least 3 weeks behind where we would normally expect to be at this point in time. Now, that's not the end of the world. The UCAS deadline has been moved back, so we have up until early May to get our offers out, and then candidates have until the 10th of June to pick their firm and insurance decisions. I think the challenge this year is universities are working even more on a kind of twin track. So universities where you have selective courses and where you are focusing a lot of effort on trying to ensure that you don't overshoot your numbers, you're going slowly. And, you know, certainly Bath is not the only university in this position. I've got similar comments on Durham and Imperial and, you know, other universities where numbers are having to be carefully managed. And then other universities, possibly those who've seen a significant decline in their European Union numbers this year, they are seeing faster turnarounds. And therefore, candidates are confused because some universities are basically saying, well, we're ready to go. You've got your offer. Why are you still not making your firm and insurance choice? And then other universities, students haven't even maybe had an acknowledgement yet that their application has arrived. And I think this is creating some challenges. I do think that there is a mismatch in some institutions at the moment between accommodation teams and admissions teams. So we're already getting applicants to Bath who are saying, well, I need to have my decision from Bath because another university has put me under some pressure to make their firm and insurance choices because that's the only way I can access their accommodation, and the accommodation is already open and it's going on a first come, first served basis. I think if you have students who are in that position, universities should be showing a little bit more flexibility this year. It's not about tying students down. It should be about giving students a chance to kind of consider all their options, not least because most universities, of course, have been pretty much closed to candidates visiting. So most students haven't really had a chance to even look at a university physically yet, who are applying for 2021. So if you have students who are feeling that they're under some pressure, encourage them to report that to you, and you should raise that with UCAS. And hopefully universities will back off from requiring students to make these decisions before they've heard back from all 5 of their choices. At Bath, we reckon probably, based on current estimates, most of our decisions will still be out by the end of March, but in 2 or 3 crucial, heavily oversubscribed departments, it may be mid to late April before we've got the final decisions out. But we'll keep students informed as we go around how things are panning out. I think we're also clearly watching with great interest as the government and the exam boards kind of announce their arrangements. Most of the kind of early concerns I think that the university sector had seem to have been assuaged. So there was talk initially in the discussions around decoupling the notification of UCAS and universities from when candidates found out. So in a normal year, universities would get their information on results via UCAS, typically 6 to 7 days before students got their information. And that gives universities time to make decisions and decide who's going to get in, who's going to not get in, and whether there's any scope for opportunities for you to take near miss students. If we'd had that decoupling and students had got their results on the same day as universities had found out, or probably more likely students had got them before universities even knew what the students had done, it would have been chaos. So at the minute, that the intention is that all the A-level boards will report to students on the 10th of August, which should mean that universities have had the results from about the 4th or 5th of August, which gives them that time to get through the offers, check how candidates perform, and make decisions. By doing that, it is likely to reduce the number of appeals because there is a strong correlation between students getting a place and then not worrying too much about what their final grades were. And clearly some universities will take students who have missed their grades because they are looking to fill places. So that should take some of the pressure off the appeals process. The one cloud on the horizon at the moment is Wales, where there is a discussion going on about Welsh students having the opportunity to raise concerns about their grades before they are submitted to the exam board. So students would get their grades potentially in early June, or indicative grades, and then have an opportunity to effectively do an in-school appeal before the final results are submitted. The challenge there is if the UCAS deadline for students making firm and insurance choices falls in those first couple of weeks in June, which they do, and the 14-day cooling off period that students have under any consumer legislation, it could mean that students get their results from the Welsh schools and then decide on the basis of that to chop and change their university choices based on what the indicative grades are. Or they wait until they hear from the appeal and then try and shift university grades. And again, that could lead to some fairly major changes in applicant behaviour based on those indicative grades. The whole point of trying to do that in Wales, by the way, was to take pressure off students by letting them know roughly how they were going to do. It probably is going to have the exact opposite effect on student mental health if they have an indicative grade without actually knowing what that ultimately means in practice. So lots of things still to resolve around the appeals process, but generally the timeline now is falling into shape. So we'll be getting the results about a week before the point we normally would. That's good because it does leave a little bit more time for appeals to run their course once we know the full detail of what the appeals process might look like. And it also means, particularly for international students who might be coming to UK universities, there's a little bit more time for them to apply for visas, meet any requirements to isolate prior to actually starting their course, and through any quarantine arrangements that need to be met, and then university courses can roughly start on time. It was going to be a particular challenge, the original timeline that was being proposed for Scottish universities, many of which start by late August or early September. So the idea that we wouldn't be getting A-level results until the end of August, which was the initial plan, had we been having some form of exam assessment, would have been very challenging. For students doing BTECs, clearly what we won't be getting this year is unit results, and that may create some challenges for courses where specific modules need to be taken or achieved at a certain level. And again, universities should be writing out to students and discussing with them and their schools exactly what type of evidence we might be needing this time around to be confident that students have got the basic prerequisites to be able to cope with particular elements of the course if that has been an issue in the past. And then we also have now a bit more detail on the access programs, and again there will be an overall result, and that should allow universities to practice a very fair admissions process for those students. There was obviously, if you remember last year, quite a lot of discussion about independent or private candidates. We are waiting to get the final details in England about how that will operate. Interestingly, the Welsh, who seem to be a little bit ahead on this particular issue, have decided that they will be running some form of where students don't have a link to a particular exam centre or school. There will be exam centres effectively set up for those students where their work will be assessed by Welsh WGC approved examiners, so that there will be a way that the students can get a mark or a grade. And then a few final issues, I guess, that are still floating around this year. I think for the most competitive courses in universities, there will be many fewer offers this year because we anticipate that the grade distribution will be much more like 2020 with teacher assessed grades and the 2019 examined grades that we got, and that therefore means there'll be probably more A's and A stars than we would normally see, and therefore if it's a very popular course which is already oversubscribed, it's effectively the only way universities can manage their numbers is by making fewer offers, and that will probably result in some schools, some students feeling a bit miffed because in previous years their assumption would have been they would have got an offer, and maybe this year they will not. But equally, the Brexit fallout has meant that many UK universities have seen many fewer European Union nationals who were historically treated the same as UK students, and as a result there is a bit more capacity in many universities than in previous years to take more students. That's not universal, it's not every subject, and it's not every university across the board where that has been the case, and there are some EU nations where we've actually seen more applications this year, most notably Ireland, because of the arrangements that have been put in place for cross-border activity between Ireland and the rest of and the UK. So that in itself will create some changes. International applications generally at the moment seem up compared to previous years, but again, how solid those applications are, I think, will depend to a large extent on the rollout of the vaccine programme and how safe the UK is looking come late August, early September as a location for students to come and travel, and how easy it will be for them to get there as maybe the world's airline networks begin to ramp up their activity back to a level approaching something like pre-COVID. So quite a lot still to mull over in the sector, but I think we are beginning to get a bit of a better sense about how the year may play out. It will probably mean that confirmation this year will be quite dramatic, and there will probably be quite a fast period of activity around confirmation and clearing in early August this year. I'll stop there, Sue, because I'm probably now roughly spoken for the amount of time you expected, and it still leaves us 10 minutes for questions.
Great, thanks Mike, thanks for that overview. It's useful to have an update. Has anybody got a question they'd like to ask Mike? You can put your hand up and I'll ask you to put your mic on, or type something in the chat pane. Okay, Andy, I think I see you. Do you want to put your mic on and ask a question?
Yes, Sue. Hi, Mike. Yes, it's a question and it's a comment, really. It's about the sort of, as you were intimating, the different kind of speeds with which universities are being able to make their offers at the moment. Because in a way, the students then have got the sort of pressure whether to hold out for you guys or whether to accept accommodation at another institution. And then I wonder if you think that might affect your figures, because you're going to make offers and say, well, I'm sorry, we've made a firm offer somewhere else. I mean, how do you think that is playing out, and how do you think we should be advising our students?
It's a really good question, Andy. Bath always generally was one of the later universities to make decisions. We always lose a number of students every year, and David Howells, who heads up the admissions team, I think, has tried to factor that into his figures as usual. What I would say for the student is there shouldn't really be a reason at this point in time where any university's trying to pin people down to accommodation. One of the universities that's getting an awful lot of notoriety in this regard is Nottingham. If you look at what Nottingham say in their information online, they basically guarantee accommodation to all first-year students who make a firm decision by the 10th of June. It's the idea that you have a first-come, first-served on which accommodation, which is the challenge. And it's not beyond the wit of a university to figure out systems that mean that you don't need to allocate on a first-come, first-served basis, particularly when we don't really know until August what students have to do or what students are going to get to actually which universities are going to end up with, because otherwise what ends up happening is you end up getting your accommodation office to allocate, and then they have to reallocate when they finally see who they get through confirmation and ultimately through clearing decisions. So certainly when I arrived at Bath 6 years ago, I found that we did start opening up accommodation before students had all had their offers. We took a couple of emails backwards and forwards between me and the head of accommodation, and actually it turned out to be cock-up rather than conspiracy. The accommodation office knew that we made our offers by the end of March. They hadn't appreciated that candidates had a month to then make their firm insurance choices, which is why they started in early April. And now we have moved our accommodation back to after candidates have made their firm insurance choices. And actually the accommodation office were quite relieved at that. So I think if you're advising students, Andy, the suggestion would be if the student feels they are being pressurised into this, this is something that needs to be raised with UCAS, because this isn't behaviour that universities should be showing. It counts as pressure selling, and I know the Office for Students, as part of their regulatory duties, are taking a close interest this year in any of these kind of activities that aren't conditional and conditional offers, but are putting students under some form of duress in a year when they're already feeling quite challenged.
Thank you for that, Mike. Louise, you've got your hand up. Do you want to put your mic on?
Hi, Sue, it's Laura, actually.
Oh, sorry, you're Elsie as well. Apologies.
Okay.
Mike,
hi. You mentioned about BTEC students and particular modules. What do you think we should do as advisors, to advise our students and possibly the lecturers, the BTEC lecturers as well?
So certainly the situation at Bath, where we've obviously made quite a number of offers already to BTEC students, we are now writing out to those students to say, okay, now we know what the situation is. Here's the sort of information that we're actually going to need. Now, I can't imagine other universities won't be doing something similar. We can't expect students to understand from an offer they've already had what the consequences now are, given that we won't be getting the unit results. So if students are worried about it, I would suggest they give the universities a week or so to kind of figure out what they're doing, because it's a fairly recent announcement. If they haven't heard anything and the university hasn't made any move to contact them, then I would ping an email to the university and just say, my conditions are that you need particular unit results. Clearly now, that's not going to be possible because of the way that the grades are going to be determined this year. Could you advise me about whether, how you will now assess my application? And that should be enough of a prompt to a university if they haven't quite twigged that they need to make an amended offer.
Okay, that's great. And can I just ask, as an example, what are you asking for from BTEC students?
So it tends to be in science and engineering subjects where we might ask for particular module results in the more mathematically based modules. And again, I think what we will be doing, I haven't touched base with the team yet on how they're planning to frame it, but I think what we will be saying is, could you make sure that we have something from your college or your school which basically kind of addresses how you are doing in those particular areas of activity. We assume anyway this year that there's going to be quite a lot of need for us to do some baseline assessments on students in their math skills and their science skills when they first arrive. So to some extent, we're looking to kind of retrofit a solution once the students have actually arrived with us. The first year in most universities is not it doesn't contribute towards the degree result. It's usually a kind of pass-fail year. And I think if universities are really kind of thinking through things, they'll be looking to use that first year to use as a catch-up year this year, so that by the end of the first year, you are confident that everybody who's on your course is at the level you'd expect them to be by the end of the first year, which means that you've probably put in a lot more revisionary activity around mathematics and science stuff, or get students into labs, because I suspect that's been the other challenge, that the students haven't had much lab time.
So almost like a really mini reference from a lecture on like certain modules, you know, how do they cope with certain types of maths and science? Yeah.
Yes, I think that's probably going to be the most helpful stuff.
Brilliant. All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike and Laura. Melanie, you got your hand up.
Yeah. Hi. Just a really quick question. At the beginning, you said how many applications you received in the last 48 hours. Was it 1 in 8? That you said you guys.
Oh, your mic is off, Mike.
Thought by now I would have figured that one out. Yes, so we've had about 29,000 applications in total. In the 28th and 29th of January, we received around 7,500, 8,000 applications. So about 1 in 4 of our applications came in the last 48 hours.
Great, thank you.
Oh, that's great. Right, okay, well, if you've got anything else, you can put into chat quickly, because we're only a few minutes from the end now. And I just want to quickly share with you 1 or 2 things about Career Palette, but also what we've got coming up for the next meeting, because you might have ideas about things you can add to the agenda. So a big thank you to Mike for giving us that quick update. That's really, really useful. Hopefully you can see my screen now to just tell you that we've just launched our next Level 6 Diploma in Careers Guidance. And Louise is going to be running that. And we've got a start date in June, or another start date in September if people can't start in June. And our brochure is available on our website on the advisor zone. So if you know of anybody who might benefit from that. And the other thing, if you're a super user and you should know who you are, then we have given you an invite to offer your parents a live Choices for 18 session that Louise and I are going to be running. There's 2 possible dates, March 23rd or April 28th, and they are on between 6 and 7. So it's trying to show parents all the different progression routes that are available and giving them a chance to ask questions. And you can also, as a school, if you can't offer it live to your parents, then you can request a recording, and that'll be a sort of neutral recording without all the chat. So you should have received an email about that, so you can sign up in whatever way suits you. And just to say, for the next session, there has been a request, I think Melanie came up with that one, to know more about what's happening in the health profession, because we know the things are growing and we know a lot more people are applying for nursing courses. So for the next session, I've got somebody who's going to come from the Royal United Hospital in Bath, who's going to talk about, from the hospital angle, what sort of job roles they need, and how they're going to get people in, and how they're going to do internal training for those people who might have come in as nursing associates or whatever. We've also got somebody come from UE who's going to talk about it from the university angle, about how they're dealing with a lot more people applying for nursing courses, and what are going to be the implications of that in terms of jobs in the future. I've also got somebody who does a lot of work with students about wellbeing, has a really nice little app to help students to develop strategies so they don't get into a difficult situation with mental health issues. And they offer free sessions for schools. And I thought that might be a useful thing for us all to know about, because, as we know, a lot of students are struggling a little bit at the moment with some of those elements. And I can see that Laura's saying, could there be something about work experience for students who wanted to go into health degrees? What do you mean, the sort of places they can go to? Is that what you're thinking, Laura? We can make it open to college as well, Natalie, because it's about all progression routes for people leaving post-16 education. The invite, you should have got an email about it. So there's a link you can send to your parents. They can sign up for the live event, or you can request a recording. Yes, okay, Laura. Well, we'll ask both. The Royal United Hospital do offer work experience, but at the moment, of course, everything's virtual. Louise has got an armload of information about all the different virtual opportunities that are coming up in health. So she's going to do a little bit on the session as well. But if anybody's we've probably got another 15-minute slot we could allocate if there's some burning thing you'd like me to sort of try and get on the next agenda. And the next meeting is April 26th, same time, 3:30 till 5, Monday, hopefully that's not a bad day, on April the 26th. Any other last minute points? We are at 5 o'clock now. We have recorded this session, so I'll try to break it down into chunks, and I'll get all the presentations, and they'll be posted up on Career Palette, and we'll tell you when that's done. Anything else anybody wants to share?